Hey, sports card fans, it's John Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. I'm joined today with Greg over at Midlife Cards. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to hanging out and talking about some stuff here. And it's National Week, so I'm excited.
Yes, National Week. This is all the excitement here. So when this video airs, it's going to be literally like 2 days before the national starts, and we thought we would do perfect timing, an update to the Vintage 100 Index, calling it the 2025 National Update. Give everyone out there, especially those who collect vintage, a sense of where cards are going. It may be helpful as you go into the National, as you see different prices, where things may be going. And for those of you who are turning into the first time with this Vintage 100 Index and don't know what it's all about, I'll have a couple videos at the end of this video that sort of tie into the origins of this Vintage 100 Index. And in the description of the video, I'll have a whole bunch of links to Excel spreadsheets that has all the back-end data. You can see which cards make up the different indexes, the different prices over time. So you can have a chance to look at the nuts and bolts from what we're going to be presenting here today. Now, I took some notes on some of the things that I saw, but Greg, some of these things you'll be taking a look and sort of analyzing on the fly, which I think is going to be really good. You're going to just see if something sticks out to you, some trends. Now, we don't claim, neither of us claim to have all the answers as to why things are looking the way they are. We may have some theories, but we would love to know in the comments if you have some thoughts on why you're seeing certain things or certain trends and what they may mean for the vintage baseball card hobby. So you ready to get into it, Greg?
I'm ready.
All right. Now, one quick thing here. When we say this is the Vintage 100 Index Hobby Report for July 2025, the way I've entered data is it's sales technically through the end of June. So it's the beginning of July. So when we talk about different months, different years, so January 2024 would be prices through the end of December 2023. So it's that leading up to. And I don't enter every single sale that's in VCP's database. I use the last sale of a given month. So at the end of that month, whatever that last sale is, that's considered the price for that month. If there happens to be multiple sales on the same day within that month, I do an average. So that's how I came up with the data. So let's get into it here. So the main Vintage 100 Index that I started, it's like over 2 years now, I think. I've been doing it for a
At
while.
least, yeah.
Started to do monthly, quarterly updates. Now it's like twice a year. It doesn't make sense to analyze stuff that short of a time frame. But here we are, Vintage 100 Index for July. Now, this index here means the average price of a card. So we have 100 cards, add up the total value divided by 100, and it's the average price for a card within that index. So that's how we measure things and trends. So back in July of last year, the index was at $1,142.89. Now it's $1,235.55. So it's gone up 8%, which equates to about $93 on average per card that's gone up in value. Now, since January, it's actually been up 15.5% or $166 on average per card. Now, the 100 index has a bunch of cards from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So the 70s cards aren't worth as much. 50s cards are worth a lot more. So everything, again, averages out. So anything here strike you of any interest on just these comparisons?
I mean, it's certainly interesting that they're up and up that much. I'm a little surprised. You never know when you see prices if are the cards that I'm looking for going up or is everything going up? And so having a wide variety, I think, is good. Now, for it to be $92 and $166 is a lot because a lot of the cards in the index aren't even worth that much. So
Right.
that means some of the bigger cards certainly made some jumps, which is good if you have a big collection.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that this isn't perfect. It's 100 cards. A lot of them are rookie cards. Um, and it all comes down to sales. It comes down, as we talked about before with vintage, eye appeal. That's a big thing now in the hobby, eye appeal. You could get one sale that for and we're looking at decade grade. I won't call it collector grade, but decade grade. So all the cards in the 50s, I'm looking at PSA 5 prices and so on. You could get a PSA 5 card that's a little off center that may not sell for as much. And then the next month, there's one that looks outstanding for PSA 5 and it sells for, 25% more. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's the price. But is there a whole lot of interest in that card? Is it because of more interest in the card, or is it just one copy was nicer than another? So there's a lot of things playing in the background here that may not be explained. But again, it's a general guide, you can
Mm-hmm.
see. So let's get to the actual chart here. So this is, again, going back, we have data now for, was it 6.5 years that I've entered data. You can do the math. It's a ton of data entry. But the dotted line on the right-hand side is the updated or new data since we did the last video. So the last 6 months of data. Obviously, you can see the big bump up there at the beginning of COVID. And Greg, I'll start off with your thoughts, your initial thoughts or impressions of what you see.
Yeah, I mean, from that dotted line to the beginning of July clearly shows an upward trend. I mean, if the whole chart was just from the dotted line to the far right
Mhm,
over there, you'd go, "Wow, it's way up," because it looks like it is way up. But at the same time, if you look at now compared to a year ago,
mhm,
7/1 2024, it is up, but it doesn't look as dramatic. So, whenever you look at a chart, it's like with my students, I'll show them, they'll say, "Oh, it's risky to invest
yeah,
in, the stock market." And I go, "Okay, let's zoom
mhm,
out. Let's look at the last 150 years. Does
yep,
that look risky?" Now, the last week looks risky. So it does look way up just looking at the last 6 months. But if you zoom out to the last 2 years, it's actually relatively flat over the
yep,
last 2 years.
yep.
So
Yeah,
that's my first
yeah,
instinct.
yeah. A couple of things that I looked at or sort of pinpoints on this chart here is that 15.5% increase over the last 6 months. It sort of mirrors the percentage rise of the first 6 months of 2020.
Mm.
That was about 18%. Just looking at sort of the slopes of the lines there and certain percentage gains. Now, does that mean I'm claiming that we're going to be at the start of another boom? No. I don't think you can extrapolate 6 months and say, hey, we're in the same situation as we were right before COVID hit. But I just thought it was interesting that the path of those two price increases sort of were equal there. I did,
I will
yeah,
throw in one other piece, not to interrupt, but let me interrupt real quick.
yeah,
The first half of the last 3 or 4 years, I guess 3.5 years,
yeah.
the first half of the year do look up.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then it looks like in the fall and early winter, things dip continually every year. So
Yeah,
it will be interesting because if you look back last year from,
yep.
August to December, it's down. The previous year, August to December, it's down. The
Hmm.
previous year, August to December, it's down. So is this what happens? Is it that as the year goes, it peaks in the summer and then it kind of corrects?
Yeah.
And if
Well,
so,
yep. Yeah.
maybe that means that the buying opportunity is in like November.
Mhm, mhm, yeah. Maybe everyone spends all their money at the National, and there's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
nothing left for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And if we were talking modern cards, you could say, well, that follows the baseball season.
Mhm.
But we're talking about vintage cards here that in theory there's an interest throughout the year. These are retired players, Hall of Famers and all that. So yeah, it's interesting to see, like, okay, beginning of the first half you see some rises, second half you see some dips. I took a look at the actual data behind the chart. Looked just quickly through to see if I could spot a couple cards that sort of maybe had larger gains that may have contributed to this increase here over the last 6 months. Mainly 50s cards, and we'll see it in some following indexes here. 50s cards sort of led the way, then 1960s cards, which makes sense. Um, and if you drew a straight line, you mentioned in your initial comments, looking back to about maybe around the August September 2024, we're almost back there. Well, I took it back a little bit further, and we're right at the point where the index was in September of 2023. So it got close toward the middle of last year. But in terms of like really narrowing down where we are and back to, it goes all the way back to September of 2023. And obviously there's you can see a general trend over the last 3 years of it. And I thought we were in sort of like a stabilizing, okay, COVID's done with, the burst and the rise and fall of the little bubble there in 2021, and we were getting back to a quote unquote new normal. And I think we're still there. But these last 6 months sort of maybe stopped this. It looked like there's a slower trend down. Not much, fairly steady, but just easing down a little bit. I think the last 6 months may have maybe hit that bottom of the recovery, if you want to call it
Mhm.
that. I don't know,
Mhm.
but so that's what I had. So yeah, we were pretty similar in our analysis there. Now, this is what we started off where what I started off with, the Vintage 100 Index, and we did a whole bunch of analysis with this. But then I decided, okay, let's obviously more data the better. So I created 3 more indexes sprouting from the Vintage 100 Index. So the next one here is I called it the Golden Age. So I took all the cards from the 50s from the Vintage 100 Index and added more cards, a few from the 1940s and the rest from the 1950s, to create another 100 card list. So this is just focusing on cards from mainly the 1940s and 1950s. So these numbers here show from a year ago almost a 20% increase, or $510 on average per card. That the index has gone up from last year, and since the start of this year, about 8%. So maybe about half of what that 12-month gain has been. The last 6 months has seen about half of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big number. Um, I'm it, I'm not really surprised. It feels it's interesting because I feel like 70s cards have been undervalued for a long time, and I kind of have been expecting, and we haven't seen the 70s numbers yet, but I've kind of been expecting the nostalgia of a lot of people in their, middle midlife, right?
Yeah.
To be starting to buy some nostalgia cards. So to see that the number is higher here, I'm not surprised by, but at the same time, I still keep waiting for aren't the 70s going to jump? So I guess we'll see that in a minute.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it does feel like a lot of people for a long time were 50s and 60s collectors if you were a vintage collector. And
Mhm.
it feels like more of those people are more 50s and now pre-war. And people are trying to go to the older thing. And I don't know if that's a supply thing. I don't know if that's an interest thing, but it does kind of feel like that. So I'm not super surprised. I think I'm surprised at how high the percentage is, but
Mhm.
not that that's an area that is bigger than others.
Yep. 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 Well, let's get to the chart and look at the long term or the long range here. As you can see, obviously, compared to the Vintage 100 index, everything's sort of like shifted up. So obviously, the 50s are the ones that are more valuable in general to the 60s and to the 70s. So you expect to see that shift up in the value. You saw the big, COVID increase there, and again, sort of reversing the trend, leveling things off again, um, building back up from, if you want to call it the low of the recovery in early 2024. Um, I looked at the data, behind it. The few of the cards that struck out to me: Jackie Robinson cards, Mickey Mantle cards, Willie Mays cards. Those, not everyone, but some of their cards, I could notice. I saw that there were some decent increases in those sale prices, and it's not unexpected. Those are three of the most popular 50s players in the hobby, and no surprise that their cars are still high in demand. That there may be a bump in those the cars of those players that are leading this, at least for the last 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And this trend here, I did look back, and we're almost back at the level of September of 2022. So the 100 index we're back to where we were September 2023. Here, the index is at the level of September of 2022. So you can see it was a much larger sort of dip, but even though it's not a huge dip, and we're back up to where we were almost 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The COVID thing continues to skew the trend line a little bit.
Yep.
It's almost like at some point as we keep moving forward, it's like looking at a post-COVID trend line, and an overall trend line is probably um, it probably give us a better idea of what real life looks like now,
Hmm. Hmm.
because if you look there, it does look like over the last year and a half, it's doing great. The
Yep.
last 2 years, it's doing okay. Over the last
Hmm.
3 years, it's flat to down slightly. So again, but then again, as we've talked about before, and I know came up last time, was the inflation factor,
Yep.
and the record inflation that's happened over the last few years can't be overlooked when looking at some of the raw numbers too.
Yep, and we're actually going to be looking at that toward the end here. I tried my best to go back to my economics degree in college. I know supply and demand, but when we get to inflation and price adjustments and stuff, I had to do a little bit of research. I think I got the calculations right to show the picture that I think you were referencing to just now, and the last time we did an update here. So
Yeah.
let's move on to the 1960s. So here we see year over year about 11.5% increase. Again, a little bit less than the 50s, about $37 increase, and over the last 6 months, about a 13 percent. Higher percentage than the 50s, $40, $41 value. From a dollar value standpoint is less, because again, with the math, you have certain percentages of a high number may not be as much of effect as it is on a lower number.
Yeah.
So you got to factor that in. So right now, the index is about of the 100 cards from the 1960s, around 355 bucks on average per card.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think about when I look at charts like this is an average of quite a few cards. And if you look at the modern market, there are going to be some cards that are 5,000%, and then there are going to be cards that are negative 5,000%. So when you look at it's more of like a, you know, a slowly moving barge instead of a jet boat, you know,
Mhm,
of
mhm.
what's going on with the modern hobby. So
Yeah,
again, it's meandering lines instead of sharp extreme lines. You know,
yeah.
it's the Dow Jones versus Bitcoin.
Right, yeah, you know, Bitcoin is, the I forget his name now, the new Jets, $40 million quarterback. What is I think he's out for the season or something?
Oh, really?
Yeah, he some toe injury or something.
Oh, the guy who used to be on the Bears.
Yeah, yeah, they brought in to replace Aaron Rodgers. I just saw it just quickly looking through some headlines or something like that, and, you know, okay, now what's that gonna do to his curves? And so with these modern
Yeah,
players, yeah, you get spikes, things happen, you know, won the Super Bowl, boom, got injured, out for the season, down. And the players we're talking about here, their careers are long gone. Just goes on sentiment, eye appeal, lots of different factors there, but it's slow moving. The changes
yeah,
are slow.
yeah.
Um, so
Justin Fields is who we're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so here's the chart again, going back to the beginning of 2019. What are your Is there anything that jumps out at you there?
Again, I'd say the last 6 months, especially, look great.
Mhm.
Um, they look great, and that's, you know, I know it's also tough because the United States we're so big that there's regional little recessions and regional little, you know, movements all over the country. So it's hard to know. You know, I'll talk to friends in parts of Texas, and it's like, oh, this area is not doing well. But then I talk to friends in Tennessee, and they're booming. And so it's hard to know when discretionary income, what it's actually like for the average person,
Mhm.
unless you actually look at data. And I look at things like this and I go, man, like somebody's got money for cards,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
vintage cards. And so I think that it's valuable to be looking at this kind of stuff. And you know, the other thing I do want to address as we're talking is, I know there are a lot of people out there that are just disgusted by the fact that you and I are looking at numeric uh, currency of cards, and they're
Yeah.
just like, that's the cards are about collecting, it's about enjoying the hobby. We're
Yep,
looking at
enjoy the card, not
money
the buy the card,
yeah.
not the grade, not the
And
price, and
and
it's
I
yes.
do get that,
Yep.
but I find things like this interesting.
Yeah.
And there are some people who are spending large sums of money. And anytime you're spending large sums of money, you kind of want to know what's happening with the stuff that you're spending. I mean, I don't check the value of my house very often,
Nope.
but I'll look every 3 months and just go, I wonder what I'm not planning on moving, but I'm
Yep.
still curious on what my house is doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy my house as an investment. I bought my house because I need somewhere to live. But at the same time, it is an investment, whether you want it to be or not. And
Yeah.
so I do think this is a valuable thing, though some people wouldn't be thrilled of the concept of this. I think it's interesting and very worthy of a discussion every
Well,
3 months or so.
you brought it up as one of your questions of the week, like how
Yeah,
important is
yeah,
the value of your cards? And to one extent, and this is maybe a comment you made, or it was a comment that someone put um, as a response to your video, is, hey, if there are some cards that may be that you think are going to be going up in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, and you have a choice on, okay, do you buy that card? Do you buy another card? Do you maybe want to buy the card you think is going to be going up in value now? Because if you wait, it may be out of your price range. And this other card, you think, yeah, I'm not going to have to worry about this. This card's not going to be doing a whole lot of movement. It's not that popular. It's what I want, but the hobby isn't that interested in it. But this one here, there's a lot of interest. I've noticed the price on this one's keep going up and up. I may want to grab one of those now. So that and some other comments of, you know, I don't look at my cards as investments either. I don't.
yeah,
I The only time I check the value of my cards is when I'm doing that, you know, top 50 valuable
yeah.
cards video at the end of the year. And that's the
Yeah.
only time I'm like, oh, okay, that card's worth this. Well, that's great. Um, would I love to have my cards increase in value over time? Sure, I think all of us would. But not to belabor that point. But I think yes, if you want to be cynical and say that we're just talking about numbers and it's all about money, no, we're trying to just glean where the market's going in general to provide you more information. The more informed you are as a buyer of vintage cards or anything else, the more informed you are, the better decisions that you can make. So that's what we're trying to do here. Um,
100%. And to your point, we're headed to the national here in a few days, and or when this comes out, a couple of days, and if I'm deciding I have this much money, where am I going to spend it? I'm probably the smart thing to do would be get the card you think is going to go up, because if you don't get that card now, it'll be more expensive when you go back next year. So
yep,
over the last 12 months, there's been a lot of love for Larry Doby. So if
yeah,
you wanted to get a Larry Doby 49 Bowman last year versus this year, it is substantially different in price. If you think that Larry Doby is headed up, then you should buy Larry Doby now. There are other guys that are flat or down. And
mhm,
so that kind of speculation, if anything, even if you're just a collector, you want to get the most out of your money that you have available, and
yeah,
predicting what's going to happen next. If we thought there was going to be a crash at the end of this year,
mhm,
why would anyone spend all their money at the National?
right,
You should wait
right.
6 months and buy it then.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Some of the things I saw here in the chart here, I looked again at the data behind it, see if I could see any cards or players more specifically that the cards have gone up, went up in value. Of course, we have Mickey Mantle, Tom Seaver, and Nolan Ryan rookie cards had some decent increases, but there were several Pete Rose cards.
Mm,
Now, of course, what happened with Pete Rose over the last 6 months?
right.
Passed away, got reinstated, or not, or his lifetime ban got rescinded and stuff. And now there's
Right.
talk: is he ever going to? Does he now have a chance to be in the Hall of Fame? Interest in Pete Rose over the last 6-9 months has increased
For
and
sure.
has led to an increase in his cards. Now, it's not just Pete Rose that's responsible for this increase here over the last 6 or 9 months, but it's a factor.
Yeah.
And his cards are prominent within the 1960s, including his rookie card. Even though it's not my favorite, but and looking at the trend line, we're back to around June 2023 levels. So again, sort of the strengthening of that bottom, I think, that we saw maybe throughout second half of 2023 into most of 2024, where 2024 there wasn't much movement at all. There was some up and down, but beginning of the year didn't end too far off from the end. Beginning too far off from the end of the year in 2024.
It
All right.
is a little interesting. Just I'll point this one thing that randomly jumped into my head as I'm looking at this chart when you're talking, is at the end of every year, like December or December, November of every year, there's this jump at the
Mhm.
end at the end for the 60s that wasn't really there for the 50s, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's guys, taking out their required minimum distribution from their 401k at the end of the year, and they buy themselves a nice 1960s cards because those are the guys that are retiring right now. I don't, but that's interesting that every single one of the years there's a
Mhm.
little spike in November, December. So that
Yeah.
kind of random.
Yeah, I know. And again, it's one of those things where you can, even if you take a hard look at all the data and you say, okay, well, here are the cards that contributed to all these year-end spikes. You still don't maybe know like why. Okay, well,
Yeah.
why did all these cards go up slightly over the last 2 months of every single year? I don't know. It's just it's interesting to note.
Yeah.
Maybe again, as you're seeing these trends over 6.5 years, the next update we'll probably do in January, February of next year for the next 6 months. We're going to see that trend again. Is that information that you can use as you're saying, hey, you know what? Oh, I'm looking at some of these cards. It's now October, so do I maybe I want to wait until January? Yep, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the last one here is the 70s, the I don't want to say like the stepchild, but one it's the poor 70s. They are included, but as you can see here, the average price for the 100 cards in the 70s index, we're talking about $145. Not huge cards. There are some more expensive, then it goes all the way down to like the 1978 Jack Morris rookie card, which I think is like $14
Hmm.
in this index here. So up $11. I mean, it's decent. And now since January though, talk about being flat. I mean, it's from January until July, the 27 cents per card on average. Not much movement at all. Now, within there's been some movement, but any general thoughts here before we get to the chart?
No, not other than I continue to be a little bit surprised that there's not more nostalgia buying from the 70s. I mean, if you were born in 65, so in 1975 you were 10,
Mhm.
most of us collected about when we were 10, then that puts you at an age where you probably have kids out of the house, you probably have more discretionary income. I'm a little surprised that more people aren't going, I need my George Brett rookie. I need my, Dave Winfield rookie and Eddie
Yeah.
Murray and Ozzie Smith. I'm a little surprised that there's not been more of that, I know Theo's got a video series he's been doing where he asks different collectors and dealers and investors what
Mhm.
they think is going to happen with different areas. And one of them was, what set do you think is going to go up the most over the next 5 to 10 years? And Mike Petty said the 71 top set was his pick. And I thought it was a great choice, and I thought his
Mhm.
reasoning for it was a great choice. And so I'm just a little surprised there's not been more movement there.
Yeah. It may come down to a generational thing. I mean, you were talking about like, hey, for those who are around 10 years old and like say 75 or so, I'm have to think now. I'm 53. So I started collecting, my first year was 78. So I was at sort of the end of the 70s. So I didn't have a lot of memories of, the early to mid 70s in terms of cards or watching baseball on TV or listening to it on the radio or whatever. And so the 70s, I don't want to say is like a lost decade to me, but the cards and the memories that I'm familiar with are more of the 80s.
Hmm.
Those are the ones I remember opening a ton of cards for and following, watching on TV and stuff like that. That was the 80s was sort of my decade. So if you go to some of the collectors maybe a little bit older than me that maybe were born in the late 60s, their current trend right now and I think you said it in the beginning is they're going older. They're going pre-war.
Hmm. Yeah.
Not, hey, reminiscing to the 70s. So I'm wondering if maybe a generation or two younger than us at some point will start seeing some of the greats and maybe deviate to the 70s. Who knows? But it may just be that weird Bermuda Triangle lost decade that you got 50s and 60s, very popular players, sets, cards, 80s into the 90s, you got all those great rookies and stars and so on. And just the 70s is just I I don't know.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
as I sit there and I think about how is next week or this week, if you're listening, will play out. I always think about, well, what if I buy a card and then I've only got $250 left, or I've only got $400 left? What would I try to buy? And I see something like this and I go, well, maybe this is my opportunity to go swoop out and buy my Dave Winfield rookie and buy my Robin Yount rookie and my Eddie Murray and
Hmm.
Dale Murphy and some of these guys. Like, maybe this is when I should do it. But
Yeah.
then I also go, well, will it ever matter? Will it always be cheap? Because
Yeah.
again, back to what I want to spend my money on is, if anybody, because people ask me this all the time, they probably ask you too, what do you think's going to go up? What is the set? What is the player? What is the card that you think is going to go up the most? Watch what I'm buying. What I'm buying generally tells you what I think is going to go up, because I want to get it before it goes up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the answer. If you want to know what John Mangini thinks is going to go up, if you want to know what, Tony Liebrick thinks is going to go up, look at what they're buying. Tony is putting together the Cracker Jack set right now, the 1915 Cracker Jack set. That should tell you what Tony thinks is going to go up.
Yep. And case in point, here's the chart for the 70s.
Yeah.
It actually, you saw that bubble a little bit in COVID, but then compared to the other indexes in other decades that you saw sort of go back down, it actually dipped, but then actually went in 2022, went higher than the COVID. Now, again, we're talking about smaller card prices here, so that may have some factor into it. But then since then, I mean, it's like, look at 2024. It's just
but there was a thing during COVID where the cards that were going bonkers were the GOATs. It was Brady and Montana and Rice for football. For baseball, it was Babe Ruth, it was Ty Cobb, it wasn't the guys from the 70s. Like, if you look in the 70s, who has a rookie card in the 70s where you would say that's a GOAT? They just aren't.
Yeah, they're all great players.
Jordan was later. There are great players. I mean, there's lots of Hall of Fame players. You could go back to 67 and 68, and you could go, Seaver and Nolan Ryan are huge names, but I mean, Ozzie Smith is great, but, Ozzie Smith, would hit 3 home runs a year. I mean, he was great defensively, but people look at the all-time names, like even like a Pele or something. People were buying Ronaldo, Messi, Pele. They weren't buying Maradona, even though maybe they should have. That just, it's interesting to me that was the movement then, and nobody in that category fall. And I know somebody's going to go, "Oh, Greg, you didn't include, Walter Payton." There are some names, but for the most part, especially with baseball, which is what we're looking at, there aren't like GOAT level guys.
Right. I mean, George Brett was, again, great player, 3 batting titles in 3 different decades and stuff, and amongst the best third basemen. But if you're doing a list of, again, top 100 baseball players of all time, even if you start in the 50s and stuff, you're not going to get as many players from the 70s make that list. You're going to get the 40s, 50s, 60s, and that's going to be the main. Some of the things I saw here, again, steady over. There's a little bit of a rise, but it's not like the previous decades over the last 6 months. No major movements since the weakening in the second half there of 2022. So second half of 2022 came off that, if you want to call it, an extended COVID bubble. Since then, it's just been meandering in that probably $10, $20, $25 on average range, up and down, and not much. So again, getting back to your comment of like, what cars to buy, with an exception of a particular card or player, we're talking about in general from the 70s. You may not want to rush out and buy some cards from the 70s again, because in general, they'll probably be the same in the next 6 months or a year, relatively speaking.
Well, and a big piece of that, I think, is because of the production. I mean, there's way more cards.
Yep.
If you look at the pop reports of the quote unquote big cards, there's going to be way more Ozzie Smiths than there are, of
Phil Rizzuto.
I mean, there's just going to be more of them. So a lot of that panic buying, if you want to call it panic buying, but I think of it more as strategic buying. there's not, I don't think Ozzie Smith cards are going to suddenly go through the roof. Like,
No.
I don't think Dave Winfield cards are going to suddenly go through the roof. I mean, even Mike Schmidt and some of these other guys that are in this era, but there aren't a million. I mean, I know there are a lot, but there aren't a million Hank Aaron 54 Topses. They're a little harder to come by. And so when you're saying, what could I maybe miss out on? You could miss out on a 49 Bowman Larry Doby. You could get priced out on that. But I don't think you're going to get priced out on a 78, Eddie Murray.
Yeah. It took me a while. I had the now this isn't in the 70s, the 69 Reggie Jackson rookie card, but Mike Schmidt's rookie card was on my list of 100 cards for $100,000, and I had been looking for the right copy at the right price for a Schmidt rookie for probably, not seriously, but looking here and there and now at the National for like probably 2 years, 2 Nationals and like a Strongsville. And occasionally on eBay, I check to see what's available. And I wasn't worried that, oh my gosh, I better grab a Schmidt rookie because it's only doing nothing but going up and up and up. And I got a great deal even after waiting that, say, year and a half, 2 years of looking for one. And I got a great deal on one that looks beautiful. So I didn't feel like I was going to be losing out on something or priced out of a card from the 70s. But
that's where population comes in. I mean, I had a card. There's a card. It's not on my list, and I won't get into the details. But there was a card that I was that came up on eBay the other day that I'd like to have in my collection, and there are 12 of them, and I was like, man, does this really have to happen right before the National? I don't want to buy this right now. And I was like, I'm just going to wait. And hopefully I'll have money left over after the National.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll still be for sale. And it sold. And so now I'm like, you're kind of an idiot, Greg. But that's real FOMO.
Yeah.
That's real FOMO.
Yeah. All right. So again, I'm always trying to find different ways of looking at this data. Again, I started off with just the 100 index. Then I said, well, let me create 3 more indexes off of that initial 100. So I said, well, if I'm doing 100 cards from the 40s and 50s, 100 cards from the 60s, and 100 cards from the 70s, why don't I combine them all into a 300 index? So again, we have the 100 card index and the 300 card index. So you have more cards where you're looking at averages, more data you may see, and we'll see it up here, maybe less volatility, things averaging out more, but that you can still see some trends. So for the 300 cards in this, I think this is new. I don't think I did this for last time. That for this 300 index, it's up about $186 year over year, about 18%. And then since January, we're talking about $95, roughly 8.5% increase. So with 300 cards now, what do you think in terms of movement?
Well, anytime you're looking at a bigger sample size, it's generally speaking a truer reflection of what's actually happening. So again, I have to applaud you on the amount of work you put in on this. I don't know how many people love these discussions about data. I do, but the people who do enjoy them, we certainly appreciate your efforts for these. And it's a lot of stuff that you're tracking. And one of the reasons you don't see a lot of things like this is because most people don't want to do that work,
Yeah.
And Market Movers actually has a few kind of indexes in their platform, which are pretty good. But this is great. And again, it's hard to deny that the last year has been good for vintage cards when you see these numbers and actual data that actually support that it's up. And so when people say, oh, vintage cards, those are old. Nobody cares about those anymore. It's like, well, they're up 18%.
Yeah.
So somebody does.
Yep. Yeah. So let's look at the chart here for the vintage 300 index, and what's your, and I think I know what you may spot here, but maybe not, and because I have my thoughts here. But what strikes you with the 300 index?
I mean, for me, the thing that jumps out is the last year and a half has been pretty pretty consistent. I mean, those little rolls in there, those little bumps along the way, that's super normal. That's one
Hmm.
sale here, that's two
Yep.
sales of a bigger card. But that shows to me a pretty consistent movement um upward. And it again, I sometimes worry that looking at data pre-COVID included in the post-COVID world
Yeah.
might skew things. But if you zoom in to the last year and a half,
Hmm.
that looks healthy to me.
Yeah.
It's not a huge jump up. It's not a huge jump down. It's a pretty it's a pretty straight line
Hmm.
with a good trend if you are holding these things. So that's the thing that jumps out at me the most.
Yeah.
It's a
I
healthy increase.
Yeah. This was my, uh, even before I actually started really building my vintage collection. I was always interested in vintage cards, and what the thing that I equated vintage cards and vintage cards prices was in terms of the stock market. I don't know if you've heard of granny stocks. These are stocks that, you buy, you hold for decades. They don't do a whole lot. They may have some, dividends, and they just slowly over time increase in value, and just it's a safe investment. They do go up in value, but it's, less risk. They're the 3 M's. I remember that was one back in my college days of studying stocks and stuff. 3M was a, they came up with new stuff, but it wasn't, high tech. And Procter and Gamble, although I think that's a family owned company, it's not traded. But those types of businesses, they're not flashy. They're not coming out with brand new things. They're not rocketing in price. They're ones you just hold, and
Mhm.
over time just slowly go up in value. What I noticed here is obviously that even with the COVID, you did see the bump, but it's it seems to be less volatile than the
Mhm.
100 cards.
Mhm.
Um, for the last 6 months, the 100 index, like I said, was up 15.5%. The 300 index was up 8.5%. They were still up, but not as much because there were more cards in there that maybe didn't do a whole lot of movement, and it brought down the overall increase once you factor in the ones that did go up. So to me, it just shows more of a steady, again, since that COVID, that it is actually sort of like a new normal and a steady range within, maybe $200 or so from 2022, 3, 24 into 25. You just got a range there, the high low range, maybe $250. Um, but over the last year and a half, there has been a steady increase.
Well, it's just like mutual funds versus individual stocks. A higher sample, a higher collection of items or numbers, or in this case cards, is a stabilizer. It
Yep.
it prevents crazy things up and it prevents crazy things down, and it's more likely to have a general trend. And so I think that this 300 represents the stability that a larger sample provides,
Hmm.
like a mutual fund would.
Yep. Yep. Good point. Now, you brought up the topic, and I think in the comments of the last video, mentioned it. You mentioned it at the beginning here, the impact of inflation. It's something that can't be ignored, not just for sports cars, but everything that we buy, from
Hmm.
gas to eggs to, you name it. Inflation is important in terms of affecting our buying power. So here's oh no, before we get to that, I thought we were going to get to we have a couple more slides here. I just want to go over these quickly here before we get into inflation stuff because I think that's some telling data here. This is just a comparison of and you can see the 300 index versus the 100 index and how the 300 index is in blue. So it's it's muted a little bit. It's a little bit below there. You don't get as much spikes. It's a little bit smoother trend, which we talked about there. Now we get into inflation. All right. So this is the monthly inflation rate. So I took a look at a bunch of CBI or Consumer Price Index and inflation data, and you could tell at the beginning of 2021 the inflation rate was down around maybe 1.25%, 1.5% per year, and it just kept going up till the early mid part of 2022 when we hit the high of just over 9% inflation. Had gone down and is still continuing to go down, but there's no doubt that general inflation that we experienced, especially between 21 and 22, had to have some impact on our buying power, and it's reflected in cart prices just like any other price of a consumable that you would buy.
Yeah, this is, I think, a really interesting chart to look at, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that will get political when they see this, which I refuse to participate in that.
Yep.
But when you look at the value of things, so go back a couple of slides here real quick for me.
Yeah.
When you look at the value of things and you go, okay, this 300 line, like, it should take more dollars to buy the same card when there's inflation.
Yeah.
But and so you would think when there was inflation, you would think that the values would actually be higher because it would take more dollars to achieve them, which could be part of the reason why in 2022 it's a little higher than it is right now, because it was requiring more dollars. But now if you go back up to the one, that when you look at this, so that might be part of what happened. But the other piece of it is I don't think it's a coincidence that the stability over the last pretty much 2 years, it's a much more reasonable inflation rate, is in line with a pretty reasonable increase, because most people don't want to go out and buy baseball cards when they're not sure what things are going to cost.
Right.
And when things are going up, your discretionary income should be less. Now, for some people, it's not, but for most people, to me, lower inflation is directly correlated with that steady increase that we've seen over the last 6 months to a year. And I think that should be a telling thing for collectors, that inflation is kind of the enemy of any sort of luxury item. And quite frankly, hobbies are luxury items. And golf courses probably had less tee times when inflation was at 9%. So, it's the same thing with cards. So I think that this is a really good thing to include in the discussion, and to see that correlation where when inflation was high, prices may have been a little higher because took more dollars to get to it, but the values and the stability of the curves and of what's happening is in sync with when inflation is low.
Yeah. When inflation was really bad, and you were looking at your groceries now are costing 25-30% more than they used to. That's out of your budget. And again, getting back to the hobby discretionary income, if you're spending all that money on just necessities and rent increasing, there's a whole bunch of things that were increasing during that time. Now they've maybe not necessarily gone down, but uh, the rate of increase, and we're going to get to this in the next slide here, which may give a little bit different picture, but you can tell that the same thing here, that it made maybe a little bit more money available for the hobby, and that maybe has gone to lift prices up a little bit. This next one here, and again, I tried to avoid getting too much into this being in an economics
Yeah.
course here,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to talk about it. This is what's called the Consumer Price Index. And for those of you who are not familiar with what the Consumer Price Index is, it measures the average change over time in the prices of goods and services. So it's sort of like a running total and a gradual um, um, path of where consumer prices are. So if you look at the middle of the chart there, from the beginning of 21 to the end of 2022, and you look at the slope of that, that's when you saw that big jump in the inflation. Then following that, the rate of increase in the consumer pricing index, it's going up. So it's not like there's no inflation, but the rate of inflation is slowing down. And so you can see that in the slope, the flatter slope, starting from say 2023 onward. And I'm going to incorporate that here into the indexes here, so you can see the effect of that. But that's a different way of looking at inflation, not just what the monthly inflation rate or yearly inflation rate is. It's on a month by month. How's the bulk of consumer goods, which is the CPI price index, what you would have to pay for a certain uh, basket of goods? How has that changed in over time?
Yeah, and again, it's good, it's good to consider these things when talking about things like what's happening with prices and values, because values are prices, and values are what people are willing and able to pay for things.
Mhm.
And uh I do think, like you said it really well, that the cost of things are still going up, but the rate at which they're going up is more stable, which allows people to basically adjust easier and potentially have funds for other things.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so
So here's, and again, this is a busy chart, and I apologize, but I wanted to try to show the picture here. So you have that monthly consumer price index. Then I overlaid the vintage 100 and vintage 300 index. And again, focus on, forget about the 2 years on the left, because we're looking at inflation really took, or was taking hold in that 21 and 22 time frame. So you can see the consumer price index and that larger spike. And generally speaking, if you look at the prices of the vintage 100 index and 300 index at the beginning of 2021 to where it was at the end of 2023, you can see that general steeper slope. Then you get to 23, 24, 25. The consumer price index, again, the slope is shallower, or the increase is shallower. And look at the index,
mhm.
it's leveling off, it's evening out. There's not as much of an increase. So I thought that was interesting with those, basically that the 2 year period in the middle, and then the 2.5 years following that.
I think that what this represents is what's really happening with card prices. We can chart prices, but unless you compare the price of cards against the price of quote unquote everything,
Mhm.
then you don't really know. So, in theory, if you look at the very beginning of the chart, so at January 1st, 2019, uh, what was the difference between the consumer price index and this basket of cards,
Mhm.
or instead of
Yeah.
basket of goods, basket of cards? And if you look at the difference there from that gray and orange line to the blue line,
Mhm.
it's about $20,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
On average, we'll call it $20. If you look at the difference between where that line is now, the
Mhm.
CPI line,
Yep.
That same basket of goods compared to that same basket of cards, it's now about $400.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what that actually means is it is that right? No, I didn't say it right. It's 20
Yeah.
bucks
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's
It's
a
about
number.
400. Yeah. On the right hand side is the index, and on the left hand side is the CPI. So you got
Okay. So
um,
it was more like
maybe 200.
yeah, $200
Yep.
to $400.
Yep. Yep.
So in theory, if the value of the cards were going up at the same rate as CPI, it would be the value of the cards would be closer to the $1,400 mark.
Hmm.
So cards have not kept up with the
Yes.
inflation rate quite
Yep.
as much as I would have hoped.
Yep.
Um, and that gives I think this is the best chart we've seen yet, because it gives you a really good idea of not what are card values doing, but what are card values doing compared to the values of other stuff too.
Yeah.
And so some people would say, see, look, cards are falling behind inflation. They're actually not going up. Yeah, they're going up, but they're not going up as much as the cost of everything else is going up.
Yes.
And I think that has value. Now, does it affect what I'm going to do?
No.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. If anything, what it does for me is it goes, oh, cards are actually maybe a little cheaper now than they were in January of 2019.
Hmm.
So does that mean that cards are not a good investment? Maybe. Or does
Yep.
it mean that cards are cheap compared to the cost of your average good?
Yeah.
Maybe. So that's up to each of us to decide. But this is such a great chart right here. I'm so glad you did this. And I will say the other thing I do want to point out there is in that 2021 year, we'll
Hmm.
call it just like January 1st, 2021 to January 1st, 2022.
Yep.
That point where the indexes went above the CPI.
Yeah.
That is an interesting moment, but we have to remember, yeah, people were getting the checks. I don't remember what they were called, but people were getting free money.
Yep.
But for me, the thing that I noticed is I was never driving. So the
Yeah.
cost of my gas was way down. We never went out to eat.
No
So we had way
movies. We
extra
didn't go to
money.
movies. Yep.
We didn't go to the movies. We didn't go on vacation. We didn't go to Target and buy a bunch of crap we don't need.
Yep.
So I remember during that time, I was like, why do we have all this money left at the end of the month? It's because we weren't going anywhere. Now, our electric bill was a little higher,
Yep.
but most of my bills were less, and a lot of people were getting extra money. But I don't think it was so much the extra money that the people got that made it go up. It's that people weren't spending their money on anything else
Yep.
except for things you could buy online
Yep.
and things like cards. And so I think a lot of that correction is in fact that, oh, now we got to go back and start pumping gas again and start going to the movies again and start going on vacation again.
Yeah.
So I love this chart, and I think you did a really good job with this, and I think that tells a really interesting story.
Thanks. Thanks. All right. The next one here, I think we only have a few slides left. So if I remember correctly, okay. So this is now I did inflation adjusted. So here's where I hope I got it right. I hope I got the math and the methodology right. So what I did was I looked at the effect of inflation on historical values. So going back, the effect of inflation, what would it be like? The price of something in 2019. Okay, and I apologize. I just noticed those the year dates I have are all screwed up. They all say 1900. But anyway, you get the point. It's 2019, 20, and all the way up to
Yeah.
halfway of 2025. I just noticed that. But um, it, as you can see in what it would be, and I think that this data here, the inflation data is only up through May. Okay, in May, the 100 index and the inflation adjusted 100 index are the same because we're at this point in time. So as you go back, what's the nominal value or shows the value of the index given the impact of inflation, allows for a more accurate comparison of prices across different periods as it removes the effect of a changing dollar. So that's the definition that I looked up. So it's going back in time. It's almost like what the price would be in like today's dollars once you account for inflation. And as you can see, the further you go back, the price is lower than what the actual index price was, if that makes sense. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this lesson in my econ class.
Yeah.
A couple, I've had several. I don't know how much I can extrapolate from this particular chart, but it does seem to show an increase. The biggest difference was during the least stable times.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure I can pull a lot out of this, but
Well, what I again, if and for those of you who have maybe more recent or more more economic knowledge than I do, if I got this completely wrong in my analysis, please let me know in the comments. But what I sort of see here is that if you take away the effect of inflation, other than that initial jump there in early 2021, look how essentially flat the prices are. In other words, for some of the increases, were they due to inflation? Once you factor out inflation, I mean the range of the index, especially the 300, or this is the 100 index. I'll just quickly show the 300. In fact, let's just do that now in interest of time. Again, things are down. Look where the inflation adjusted numbers are. I mean, that is, you get that rise in 2021 and then essentially flat prices. So when we said another index as well, it went up by 15% here. Went, look at that trend in that 1 year, how it went up or went down. Once you factor out inflation, card prices, at least in the 300 index here, haven't changed that much.
they haven't changed that much. But when you compare them to 2020,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they're you know
Yeah.
over 100% more.
Yeah.
So even and that's another thing that I don't think that we can just ignore, is that there was a bubble from, I don't know what it was like in the rest of the country, but when there was a bubble for housing and then the bubble burst, the houses came pretty darn close to what they were before the bubble. They
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
came way down, at least out here in California.
Yeah.
And they maybe stayed a little bit above. But after the bubble burst in the vintage card market,
Yeah.
they're still double what they were.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a bubble. Yeah, things crashed. Yeah, panic, whatever.
Yep.
But they're still 100% higher than they were before COVID.
Do
That's
you
a
think?
major
Yeah,
change.
yeah. But I'm wondering, and again, this it's just pure speculation on my part, just something I thought of when COVID hit and people had the disposable money, maybe not the stimulus checks, but just hey, they're not having to pay gas and stuff like that, and they had these cards, and as well as I do, there were more people that started YouTube channels. I started my YouTube channel at the beginning of I think it was 2020. More people were getting into the hobby.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you looked at the demand, the people that were collecting vintage cards, maybe that 2020 leading into 2021, some of it is a result of just more people collecting vintage cards, wanting the vintage cards. So the demand, even we know the supply of vintage is finite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe not graded versus ungraded, but the total number of cards, unless if anything, they're going down. If heaven forbid some get lost or destroyed, they're not creating more of them. So demand's pretty flat or steady. With more people coming into the hobby, looking at maybe vintage, there's probably more people that came in on modern, granted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But on vintage, maybe that spike of interest, we have some more money. Hey, you know what? I saw these cards. I may want to do this and getting into the hobby and doing this and all these YouTube videos and this. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe a small part, but just something that increased the demand.
Without question, that is, I think, the reason. And I think without question, what a chart like this proves is a lot of those people who came in then haven't left.
Yeah.
Because if they had left, then the demand would have
Sure.
dropped all the way back to the pre-2020 era, and the prices would have dropped all the way. Because, like you said, the supply is the same.
Yep.
So the only way that the price could remain high is that the demand went up. And if the demand didn't stay higher, then the prices would be back to where they were. So without any question, a lot of people got back into the hobby in vintage and have stayed.
Yeah.
Without any question.
I'm one of them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right around that time, that 2020 to 2021 is I want to start building a vintage collection. Now I'm one small little tiny little part, but I'm sure there's others like me.
For sure.
And I continue to stay in with vintage here. So,
Yeah.
okay, I think we may have beat inflation to death here. I think there's just a couple more slides here, but okay, I think it was a good conversation,
Yeah,
and hopefully
sure.
those who have been watching this a little over an hour here are still with us and appreciate. Again, I know we're going beyond the cards themselves, and yeah, I know we're focusing on prices and economic stuff, but I think again it gives the more knowledge that you have, because cards cost money. There's a monetary aspect to a hobby. You may enjoy the cards, love the cards. To acquire the cards, you need money, and you have to pay a certain price to obtain those cards. So again, this was just the 300 index versus the 100. You get the same general picture. There's a narrower difference between the two. All right. So let's wrap things up there. I got this slide and one last slide, and that'll be it for our analysis. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the specific cards that had a new record high sale for that particular card. And again, for the 48 cards, they're PSA 4 copies. For the 60s cards, they're in PSA 6s. So I highlighted two cards. And the reason why I highlighted them is the 1970 Topps Reggie Jackson within the last 6 months had two record high sales. $243 in April, which meant the last sale in March, and then $294 in July, meaning end of June. And then Dave Parker, which I think is probably no surprise with his announcement election to the Hall of Fame, he had three. It was in February and then June and July. So three increases for his 74 Topps rookie card, record high sales within the last 6 months. But any other cards on this grouping here stick out to you or make you go, or hey, that makes sense?
Yeah, I'm curious as to why the Reggie Jackson. I mean,
Yeah.
why would not even his rookie card? Why would a second year Reggie Jackson be hitting new levels? Seems odd.
I don't think he's in the high number series. I don't think the Reggie Jackson's in the high number series. So that if it did, or if it was, that could explain some of it, maybe. And it's not
I
like his
don't
rookie card is a multiplayer and people are looking, hey, his true rookie is his 70 versus his 69. I don't think his rookie card is out of reach for most people. So it's not like, well, I can't
yeah.
afford his rookie, so let me get his second year. So yeah, the 70 Reggie Jackson. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments of if you have any idea why those two the card hit two record sales there. You see a couple
Yeah.
Mickey Mantles. You see a lot of 49 Bowman cards, and I think with some of these, if you want to take the time to actually look at some of the data, especially for the 40s cards, some of these cards don't sell every month. So there some of these cards have stretches of 5, 6, 7 months where there hasn't been a sale of, say, PSA 4 copy of a 49 Bowman Richie Ashburn. So then when one does sell, oh, well, it sold less because the last one you're comparing it to was maybe a year ago. So you
But
get some
but
of
like
those older
a
cards, yeah.
but like a Willie McCovey rookie is selling like weekly. Like
Yeah.
that's not I
Yep.
mean,
That's not a hard card to find in a 6. I mean, it's not easy, but it's not super hard to find a 6. Sandy
yeah, I don't
Koufax and
know.
Ernie Banks. I don't know. I find this interesting of just, pulling up just to see which cards. And the other thing that you see here, what did I talk about when I described the back end data of the 60s? Oh, well, you have, the Seaver, the Ryan, and hey, Pete Rose cards were going up. There's not a single Pete Rose card on that list that hit a new record high in the last 6 months. Now, maybe prices have gone up for some Pete Rose cards recently, but not to record high levels. Why these cards? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
The Mini Minoso, 52 tops Mini Minoso, I could see that because I don't think there's a whole lot of PSA 5 copies
Yeah.
out there that's sold. So for that, I can see, hey, one came up and I've been looking for a while. Yeah, it's a little higher. It's an auction and there are a couple people vying for it. The other thing is some of these could be buy it now, some could be auctions, and that could
Yeah.
play into a factor. That I just again thought it was interesting to see which ones had new record highs.
243 and 294 on Reggie Jackson don't
Yeah.
seem like buy it now numbers, but
No, no,
it's
no. Like the
interesting.
65 tops Mickey Mantle for 1860. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe,
Bowman Duke
yeah.
Snyder 2200. Yeah, those even numbers are
Yeah.
probably buy it nows, and the
Yeah.
odd weird numbers are probably
For,
auctions.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. The last slide here. So we talked about new highs. Well, here's stuck in a time machine is what I call it. Here are 4 cards that if you took a look at the price of their card at the beginning of this index period, January of 2019, to where it is in July of 2025, the 1951 Bowman Whitey Ford is down $79. And you have the 61 tops Ron Santos, 75 tops Gary Carter, and that 78 tops Jack Morris I talked about. Okay, now it's around 1850. I was saying maybe around $15. Carter and Morris, now again, there were ups and downs, of course, but if you just look at where the price was 5.5 years ago, yeah, I can't explain the 51 Bowman Whitey Ford. Now again, we're talking about a PSA 5 copy, but so haven't been a lot of sales, but still, I don't know.
I'm not surprised to see 2 pitchers,
Yeah,
and I'm not surprised to see a catcher because those 2 positions continue to not get much appreciation for whatever reason. I'm to be honest with you, I'm thrilled to see that for the Whitey Ford
yeah.
because that's a card I really want.
I
That's a that's a
that's on my
card
hundred
that's
thousand
on my
dollar card list too.
yeah,
So I'm like,
that's a
keep it
card that
there.
if I have a few, like I was saying earlier, well, what do I do if I have $500 or $600 left over? The Whitey Ford rookie is
I
one of the
love that card.
cards that I'd love to land like a 2 or 3 of.
Yep.
So I none of those names are sexy.
Yeah,
They're
they're
not
not.
sexy names. It's not Hank Aaron, Sandy Koufax, Mickey Mantle.
Nope.
They're all kind of like
Second, third tier Hall of Fame in terms of a hobby. I don't want to take anything away from their
correct.
careers. Don't
Whitey
start throwing
Ford is
tomatoes,
one
as you
that
say.
I've never understood
Yeah,
the Whitey Ford thing because he
yep.
was the premier pitcher on a title contending team who performed well in the playoffs every year. I mean, the guy was a stud. I
Yep.
don't understand why Whitey Ford doesn't get love. But they're not super sexy names. It's
They're
not
not
Clemente,
hobby
it's not
darlings.
Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
So they kind of get forgotten. I mean, if I do a video and say, "Hey guys, big pickup. I
Yeah.
got myself a 61 tops Ron Santo."
Yeah.
Everyone would not
Yeah.
again, nothing wrong with a Ron Santo
Yep.
61 tops card. It's a nice looking card.
Yep.
But it's just not an eyebrow
Yep.
raiser. So
Yep. Yep.
interesting for sure.
Yeah. I again just looking at all this data after entering thou- thousands of price datas. You just look through things, and I have certain calculations and columns and stuff, and I go, that's interesting about the weighty. How many others are actually down over the last 5.5 years, and there were three more. So,
Hmm.
final thoughts, takeaways. We're almost approaching an hour and a half here. I knew we would get into some different conversations here. Any final thoughts? Any final takeaways?
Um, well, first of all, thanks for including me. And I know you put in a lot of work ahead of time. And last couple of times we've done this, I've looked at the data ahead of time, and I felt like I was looking at the answers to the test before the
Mhm.
test.
Yep.
And so this time I was just like, I want to kind of just I want to be more authentic with my reactions and stuff by seeing it
Hmm.
for the first time. And so I'm glad I did that. Like it was a lot of fun to be able to kind of unpack it in real time. Um, I think that a lot of people out there, especially people who aren't vintage collectors, will constantly give anecdotal opinions about vintage of nobody cares about those players anymore, nobody saw those guys play. And we're talking about 50s, 60s, 70s, which is an era where a lot of people who are collecting did see those guys play.
Yep.
But you hear people make those comments, but they're just opinions. They're not facts.
Hmm.
And so anytime you look at data that is collected scientifically, then it's not an opinion, it is a fact. And so when you look at the trends of actual sales, you're actually looking at facts. And so it's nice to have some real information to be able to say, well, actually, it's interesting you say that because over the last 6 months, 300 of the vintage cards that have been tracked are actually up 18%. Like
Hmm.
it's not that people don't want them anymore,
Yeah.
and somebody might counter and say, well, my Ellie De La Cruz is up 100%, or
Yep.
my whoever the player is.
Yep.
But there are also guys that are way down. So I would never tell somebody that their portfolio for retirement should be cards.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use cards as my source of investing for the future, but I enjoy doing it. And if some values go up along the way, that's certainly a bonus. And I think that this shows to me, and I guess if you were to say, what is your main takeaway? I think my main takeaway is the beauty of the long chart is we can see what things were like before COVID.
Yep.
And now we have a really good amount of data to look at what is the hobby like after COVID. And it's clearly at a much higher value. It's no longer dropping, it's
Yep.
stabilized, and it's higher, which again, sort of like we said a minute ago, tells me that the demand for vintage sports cards, baseball cards specifically, is higher now than it was before 2020.
Yep.
And that doesn't seem to be eroding as we come out of COVID and into our new normal. It's clearly stabilized that there are more people and more money in the hobby.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, great takeaways there. And again, I believe it or not, I enjoyed entering in all this data. I'm a data. I love data. I love looking at it and trends and stuff. And I hope the people that have been watching this video takes this as just again additional information, a tool for you to use, whether it's in the national, whether you're looking at stuff on eBay, auction houses looking to buy cards. You can take some of this information, general information, and say, okay, how's yeah, you want certain cards because you want certain cards, regardless of the value, the future value, whatever. There's certain ones you just want in your collection, but there's other purchases that you may be wanting to make that price or future price has some impact or meaning to you. You can maybe use this data and think about a more macro. So in economics, is macro and micro. Macro is the bigger picture. Micro, of course, is the small look at things on a macro level. Hopefully this data gives you an idea of the things that you mentioned there, that the state of the hobby, the vintage market, the vintage hobby, what the general demand for a general basket of vintage cards is doing. Within that basket, you can have some going up and down for various reasons. Again, eye appeal plays a big part in here, which you can't really extrapolate eye appeal from these prices. But just hopefully this is another tool. Hopefully you enjoyed some of it. I really appreciate you, Greg, coming on and doing doing this video again with me. Love your insight and your analysis. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you and so many others at the National here in just a few days. Hopefully you found this information helpful. And with that, that's all we have for you. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.